Feel free to share tonight's Facebook live stream or host a watch party on your page, or share the YouTube video tomorrow. If you share the Facebook live stream tonight, make sure to communicate that questions for the candidates should be submitted to middlegeorgiavotes@gmail.com. That's middlegavotes@gmail.com. We'll not be collecting questions from Facebook posts because of the numerous locations we hope this event will be streamed. The questions submitted via middlegeorgiavotes@gmail.com are being collected in a Google Doc by a team of screeners, one person from each of the sponsor organizations, headed by Marty Copland and including Deborah Cockle and Therese McGee. This team will sort the questions and group duplicates. The forum moderator, Cherie Marshall, will access the document in order to ask the questions. Be aware, prior to the start of the forum, we already received more than 60 questions, so it is clear we will not get to all of them this evening. Many are duplicative or similar, and from that we know which areas are of most concern to our community. Thank you to the 4 criminal justice candidates for agreeing to participate in this forum, and even more so because of the novel experience this will be. As with the mayoral forum, we're forging new paths in tonight's effort. In alphabetical order, our candidates are, for District Attorney, David Cook and Anita Reynolds Howard. For the Office of Sheriff, David Davis and JT Ricketson. We are grateful to have Rachel Gamble volunteering as our Zoom meeting manager. Rachel is versed in numerous media platforms and has been an invaluable resource in this endeavor. You may hear or see Rachel during the evening if technology hitches require. We don't want any candidate disadvantaged by the platform, and Rachel is here to assure that they are not. Also on your screen is Carolyn Hargrove, an experienced veteran of candidate forums, maybe not in this particular format, but she has been a member of the League of Women Voters for numerous years and will serve as this evening's timer. Candidates are familiar with her paddles, which indicate 30 seconds and 15 seconds remaining, and a stop paddle. These will be visible on your screen and to the candidates. Zoom gives us the interesting ability to mute a speaker, but we trust that won't be necessary, and that all candidates will heed the stop sign when their time is up. Finally, this is a forum and not a debate. There will be no rebuttals. All questions will be put to all candidates. The forum's moderator will explain more about the format momentarily, but for now, I'd like to call on Sylvia McGee, President of the Georgia chapter of the Links International, to introduce the evening's moderator.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Tuesday, June 9th, is an election day. Your vote is your voice and your power. Early voting began on May 18th, and it will continue until June 5th at the Board of Elections, located at 2525 Pioneer Avenue. This Saturday, May 30th, has been designated as Saturday voting day from 9 a.m. through 4 p.m. at the Board of Elections. Voters can also vote absentee by first requesting an application for a ballot and then returning the ballot by mail. You can visit the Board of Elections website for detailed information regarding the calendar, ballots, and elections. Now, I am pleased to introduce the moderator for this evening's forum. Cherie Marshall, a native of Nashville, Tennessee, spent most of her career as a journalist, overseeing topics ranging from politics to courts and public safety to sports. She began her career as a copy editor with the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, where she was later named deputy managing editor. In 2001, she joined the Macon Telegraph as vice president and executive director, retiring in 2018. Ms. Marshall received a Bachelor of Arts in English from Spelman College in Atlanta and a Master of Arts in Journalism from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Cherie, thank you for serving as tonight's moderator, and I now yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Sylvia, and good evening to our candidates and our audience. As Claire explained, our forum tonight consists of two segments. The first segment will feature candidates for district attorney. The second segment will feature candidates for sheriff. Again, the forums will be conducted in a question and answer format. We will begin with opening statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make their opening statement. The order of the opening statements was determined by a drawing prior to tonight's forum. After opening statements, I'll be asking each candidate 4 questions prepared by the sponsoring organization. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each of the 4 questions, and the order of answering will rotate with each question. After these 4 questions, I will proceed with questions we received from community members by email both before and during the forum. I'll get to as many of these as I can in the allotted time. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each of the audience questions. We'll end with closing statements from the candidates. Candidates will have 90 seconds to make these statements. The order of closing statements will be the reverse of the order of opening statements. After the closing statements, the candidates for district attorney will exit the forum and the candidates for sheriff will join us. With that, let's begin with an opening statement from district attorney candidate David Cook.
All right. Okay. Hi, my name is David Cook, and I'm incredibly proud of being our DA. As a husband and father of 3, I know protecting our families is our top priority. You might know I'm married Rebecca Rowell Cook, a local girl and daughter of one of our great pastors. Like most of you, Rebecca and I have been sheltering in place together with our son and 2 daughters, along with my wonderful mother-in-law, Ruth Rowell. One of my first acts as DA was to secure a life sentence for Jamaica Pope, who burned and murdered LaTosha Taylor, and to secure justice in the Lauren Giddings case. I've spent the last 23 years specializing in seeking justice against those who would prey upon Georgia women and girls. And I'm proud to be just one of 2 nationally recognized experts in sex trafficking prosecution in Georgia, a horrific crime that overwhelmingly victimizes women and girls. As our DA, I'm proud to have increased gang prosecution by 1,000%, created my signature school justice partnerships, 2 of only 5 in Georgia, where several hundred young women and girls have been kept in school and out of jail, increasing graduation rates and decreasing crime rates, and of my expungement events where we've helped several hundred women correct their records, helping those that want to get back to work to do so, improving employment numbers and decreasing crime. I was awarded the Macon Lawyer of the Year last year in large part because of my record helping Georgia women and girls. And tonight, I hope to earn your support and vote to do so again on June 9th. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from district attorney candidate Anita Howard.
Ms. Howard, this is Rachel. I need you to unmute your microphone, please.
Okay.
We got you there.
All right, perfect. Good evening. I want to say thank you to the gracious host for hosting this informative event. I am Anita Reynolds Howard, the wife of a proud Central Charger, a mother, a grandmother, a 15-year career prosecutor, and a college professor. As a granddaughter of a Georgia sharecropper and second-generation college graduate, my story is unique. I am the daughter of 2 graduates of Georgia's HBCUs, Payne College and the Fort Valley State University. My parents instilled the values of family, education, achievement, community service at a young age. Those shared values have shaped my philosophy on public service, justice, and excellence, and that's why I believe it is time for change in the Macon Judicial Circuit, and I am that change. As your district attorney, I am ready to serve on day one because of my vast experience, knowledge, and commitment to fairness, transparency, and criminal justice reform. My campaign has reached out to thousands of voters in Bibb, Crawford, and Peach counties. The demand is the same. They want change. On June 9th, you have the opportunity to vote for experience, commitment to public service, and a new face of justice for the Macon Judicial Circuit by electing the first woman and first African-American district attorney in Middle Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question of the evening. The United States is one of the few countries in the world that requires cash bail for anyone who has been arrested and wants to stay out of jail while awaiting trial. The bail system is disproportionately oppressive to people of color and the poor, leading to a revolving cycle for many. Does this system need reform? And if so, what would you do to bring equity to the process? And we'll ask Ms. Howard to start.
So yes, it does need reform. And I will bring an initiative, case flow analysis. I believe that you cannot improve what you refuse to measure. And as you just stated, there are disproportionately outcomes for minorities and individuals who are poor. And being that we have a 27.5% poverty rate here in Bibb County, we know that minorities and the poor are disproportionately affected, but we don't know what that looks like. It's not enough to say that we're being fair. So as district attorney, I will have a case for analysis that will start from day one, measuring exactly where we are. So we will have a roadmap for where we would like to be. And that analysis will be available to the public because I believe in transparency. And that is something that we are lacking currently. We don't know where we are.
Thank you. Mr. Cook.
Thank you for the question. Studying this issue to see, whoops. Okay, can you hear me now? All right. Over a year ago, I began studying this issue to see which cash bail reform measures have worked the best, because not all of them are created the same. And after analyzing all the different models, we came up with a proposal that would end cash bail for all minor offenses. And we began discussing that with the chief judge and other partners, and we're on our way to implementing something like that when COVID-19 hit. As many of you probably know, most crime is a result of trauma and poverty and the effects that come along with that. And oftentimes people who are in jail may have committed a very minor crime, but they still want to work and be a productive member of society. And what we found is that unless you institute cash bail reform, many people will be in jail simply because they're poor and they can't afford bond. However, if you institute what we've already about put together, the list of offenses that are minor, and allow folks who've committed minor offenses to go on and continue to work, I think we would be much safer. I can tell you that the majority of those offenses, the defendant is going to end up on probation if he's convicted anyway. So obviously the system trusts them to be out at some point. So the question is, do you want them to be out while they still have a job and can make a positive contribution? Or do you want them out once they've lost their job and they've continued a cycle that leads to poverty and more trauma?
Thank you. Our second question. 6 different bills have been introduced to expand Georgia's record restriction and sealing laws, something 41 other states allow. Since law enforcement retains access to records in Georgia, do you believe prior offenders should be able to seal certain records after they have shown they are rehabilitated, making it easier for them to access employment and housing? If so, what will you do to provide more second chances, and how will you encourage colleagues and legislators to pass expansion of record restriction in Georgia? We'll start this time with you, Mr. Cook.
Thank you. Well, I've already shown what I believe about record restriction. 2 years ago, I came across data that showed that when you expand record restriction, crime goes down and employment goes up. And what we found is that the people who are asking for record restriction have already changed their lives. Typically, it's something that happened many years ago when they were young. It's usually something minor. And so what we've done is, as soon as I got that data and I saw that it worked, we began hosting record restriction events about 18 months ago. And we've had several of them. We've had them at churches, we've had them at the Tubman. And as the word has gotten out about them, we've had hundreds of people, literally hundreds, and people line up hours before the events begin so that they can get their records restricted or expunged. But what's very important about this is we know that not only do they typically have an issue with having an offense off their record, they also may have an issue with child support because that offense is keeping them from getting a job, and so they're behind on child support and their license may be suspended. We know that they're oftentimes a veteran and they may qualify for veterans benefits. We know that even though they may have an offense that can't come off their record, they may qualify for a pardon and they may be someone that you would want to have a pardon. And so we bring all of those partners together along with defense attorneys who can assist us, and we actually restrict their records there on site. So that is something that I've done several times over the last 18 months. And one last thing I'd like to point out is we had planned one for Holy Week. We couldn't have it because of COVID-19. And so today we launched an online portal to have people to begin this process free of charge and online, and expect a further announcement about that tomorrow.
Thank you. Ms. Howard.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I am a proponent of record restriction, but I want everyone to understand and know that record restriction law changed in the state of Georgia in 2013. And yes, that's been offered here in our circuit for 18 months, but we could have started 6 years prior to that. I believe that when the legislatures enact policies to positively affect our community, especially when dealing with criminal justice reform, that those need to be implemented in a expedient way, a sense of urgency, because we do want folks to get back to work and have a sense of hope and sustainability. So they should not have had to wait for 6 years. But I will do more than what the legislatures do. I believe when you're intentionally engaged in the community that you serve, you understand the needs and the concerns of that community. And so I will initiate a Second Chance Academy. Record restriction is a positive change, but we need more progressive criminal justice reform. Let's try to keep folks from having records. Nonviolent offenders. This will be a youthful adult program, individuals 17 to 26. We will focus on education, community service, and restorative justice, because I believe that those affected by crime should be a part of the process of healing. And if we make that connection of humanity, I believe that that will lessen our crime. So we need to do more than what they tell us to do in Atlanta. We need progressive leadership right here in Bibb, Crawford, and Peach counties. And that is what I will do as district attorney.
Hey everyone, Rachel Gamble here real quick with a note about the microphones. We're having some issues with the muting, and so if y'all will give me 1 second, I'm gonna mute everyone all at once, and then I'm gonna unmute everyone, and hopefully this will fix our issue. All right, that should work. Sorry for the interruption, carry on.
Thank you, Rachel. The third question tonight. The killing of Ahmaud Arbery has amplified the issue of distrust of law enforcement and the justice system by people of color in our nation. What proactive steps would you take to build trust among people of color in Macon-Bibb and to ensure equitable treatment of all parties? Ms. Howard, please go first.
Thank you. Yeah, I first want to say that my heart, as a mother, my heart goes out to Ahmad's mom and Ahmad's father. And as a prosecutor, I know that justice definitely needs to be served in that case. And so, as I said before, I will be intentionally engaged in the community. You have to be connected to the community. What we've been experiencing is drive-by engagement. Crime isn't getting any better because the needs of the community are not being considered or not understood. And so, as a part of my District Attorney Accountability Council, that council will also be made up of members from the community that will look at policies in the district attorney's office, such as trainings. I will make sure that all individuals in the DA's office have sensitivity training. I will advocate that we have a hate crimes bill in Georgia. I've seen many press conferences from our current, district attorney, my opponent, not one of them about hate crimes. And so that is something that needs to be advocated for. I also would advocate that we do away with citizens arrest. I'm a huge fan of the Anna Griffith Show, and if everybody remembers citizens arrest, but we are not in Mayberry, and lives are being lost. And so those are the things that I know are important to this community and that will help to promote equitable outcomes. When you talk about communities of color, those are typically disadvantaged communities, a lot of them. And we have to, as district attorneys, present opportunities so that we can ensure we do have equitable outcomes and that justice is prevailing in Bibb, Crawford, and Peach counties.
Thank you very much, Ms. Howard. Mr. Cook.
My first act as DA occurred at 1 minute after midnight on January 1st, 2013, when I called in the GBI to investigate an officer-involved shooting of an unarmed man at Kroger. My predecessor, Greg Winters, had refused to call in the GBI some 10 days earlier, even though there had been a public uproar about that case. And there was a lot of distrust in the community about it. In doing so, I not only called in the GBI for that case, but I made an announcement that from here on out, every single officer-involved shooting would be investigated by the GBI. Now, a lot of people take that for granted nowadays. They think that's just what happens, but that wasn't the case. It didn't happen until I was elected DA and I made that the policy. And now that happens as a matter of course. Every single officer-involved shooting is investigated by a neutral third party, and the results are accountable and transparent. You may recall that at the close of that case, I not only announced the decision, but I made a copy of the case file available to every member of the media and had pre-printed out Freedom of Information Act forms for them to sign right there and receive a copy of the file on site, and that I delivered a copy of that to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Also in that, I established my Faith and Community Leaders Advisory Board. So we have been in constant engagement with members of the faith community about cases like that are hot button issues to get feedback and advice. And finally, I established implicit bias training free of charge for all the members of the School Justice Partnership, and I have mandated that every member of the DA's office take that training, and we've already signed a contract for that for last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final question from our partner organizations. Juvenile justice versus charging as an adult is the subject here. According to the Georgia Crime Information Center, juvenile arrests in Georgia have been declining since 2008. Also, the vast majority of offenses committed by 17-year-olds are misdemeanors. Georgia is one of only 3 states in which a 17-year-old is charged, tried, and sentenced as an adult, regardless of the severity of the offense. What is your position in raising the age of criminal responsibility to 18? Additionally, what would you do to try to reduce the school to prison pipeline? And Mr. Cook, we'll go with you first.
National experts say that the #1 way to reduce the school to prison pipeline is by instituting a school justice partnership. There are only 5 school justice partnerships in all of Georgia. There should be 159, but there's only 5, and I started 2 of them. We've had those here in this circuit for 2 years, and after it's been instituted, we have intervened with over 500 kids who previously would have been arrested and prosecuted. You know, based on the data that I've seen and what I've learned over the last several years, I can just tell you, you know, what our moms told us is true. It's better to raise strong kids so that we don't have to fix broken adults. And we know that many of these kids are carrying more on their backs to school than just their backpacks. They're carrying multiple traumas, like a parent in jail or a parent on drugs or both. Their lights may be turned off. They may not have enough to eat. They may be undergoing abuse. And we know that when we intervene with these kids, when they commit minor offenses at school, and instead screen them for services and get them the services they need, that they are very unlikely to reoffend. In fact, the recidivism rate when we've done this is under 10%. So that has been something that I've instituted. We've also looked at the next build up, which is the FAST panel, which screens every single juvenile arrest, because over detention actually leads to more detention and more crime. So we would have had that instituted already had COVID-19 already hit. We were working on that over the last several months. I will tell you that these things take time to build up. It takes over a year to build a school justice partnership, according to the models. But we have done that, and we will continue to do that. I do agree in raising the age, by the way. I think the frontal lobe research shows that kids don't act rationally or more like adults until they're well into their 20s. Thank you.
Ms. Howard.
Yes, thank you. Unlike my opponent, I have been on the front lines of juvenile justice reform in Georgia before even 2014, when the legislators changed the law to enact juvenile justice reform. I became a juvenile prosecutor for a 3-county circuit in 2012, and I knew then that our young people needed other opportunities and alternatives. And even in an effort to do that, I taught life skill classes myself, because it was difficult for us to find counselors. And so I went through a training, proven training, and I taught those classes myself. So, and as far as the partnership is concerned, that should have started again in 2014. That is when we have juvenile justice reform in Georgia. You can call it a partnership, you can call it a pretrial diversion, you can call it giving children another chance. But the bottom line of what was supposed to happen in 2014 is children were supposed to be offered services of rehabilitation in the community, if possible, without arrest and without going to court. And so if something was done in 2014, we wouldn't have these alarming 500 numbers now that you hear my opponent talking about. Now, again, I am a progressive prosecutor, so I want to do more. And so I will have a DA Junior Justice League, which will be a program for 7th and 8th grade at-risk youth. We will identify those youth before they actually commit a crime. And we will teach them the court process, what that looks like, what their rights are. And there will also be a parent accountability component to that program, because we want to make sure that, you know, when we're building the children, we're also building the family.
Thank you. We'll now move to questions from the audience. You've both touched on this question already, but let me ask again. What is your position on expanding accountability courts and or increasing alternative sentencing options? Are you open to incorporating restorative justice practices? Ms. Howard, would you answer first, please?
Yes, thank you. You're exactly right. My initiative, the DA Second Chance Academy, speaks directly to that progressive criminal justice reform that you're talking about. I will also be an advocate and proponent to the accountability courts that already exist. I have, talked with those individuals, and there is not a lot of participation from the district attorney's office. In fact, you can have two types of pleas. You can have what we call pre-adjudication and post-adjudication. And a lot of the individuals that are being placed into the accountability courts, the judges are actually placing them there. So as district attorney, I will be proactive and put veteran prosecutors who have the experience in law and the experience in life to ensure that we are utilizing all of the alternatives so that we can give individuals a second chance and make our community safer.
Thank you. Mr. Cook?
Well, you don't have to ask me what I'll do. You can just watch and see. I've already helped expand accountability courts. When I got here, we did not have a veterans court. And working together with former Judge Tripp Self, we saw the need for a veterans court. So many veterans come home from serving our country, again, with trauma, with the results of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the related problems that come from serving our country. And so we worked together with other partners. We created the first veterans court in the Middle Georgia area. And I actually hired a veteran that had law clerked for me who had become an infantry captain, and he helped found the veterans court, and he was the first prosecutor to participate in it.
Thank you. The next question. What programs are available for nonviolent, mentally ill, and/or drug-addicted defendants? And do you have plans to expand on those programs during your tenure? We'll start this time with Mr. Cook.
Well, our office fully participates in both mental health court and drug court, and we've looked at expanding that. So that's already something that we've been working on for many years. I would have to say, though, that the biggest thing we're trying to do, again, going back to building strong kids so we don't have to fix broken adults, is that we've continued to expand the services available in our school justice partnership. So many of these kids could have only gotten services had they been arrested previously. And we made sure that they could get these services without being arrested. Every single jurisdiction has pretrial diversion. We've had it here for 30 some odd years. But doing something proactive like the School Justice Partnership allows these kids to get the services that they need so that we won't meet them in adult court later.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Ms. Howard.
Yes, yes, I will, and I will have an initiative, as I said, the District Attorney Second Chance Academy that will focus on nonviolent offenders. I also serve as a member of the Community Advisory Board for the Hope Center, and there what we do is we focus on the education and awareness of AIDS and HIV and how it affects the Middle Georgia community. But what I also like about being on the advisory board, we bring individuals from all different organizations, housing, mental health. And so as part of my District Attorney Accountability Council, we will start initiatives where we're bringing individuals in so we can expand housing and needs for mental health individuals and treating them from a holistic point of view.
Thank you.
Ms. Marshall, if you could unmute your microphone.
I'm sorry.
I think we may have hit it I think we hit it at the same time. That's all right.
What would your policy be regarding charging children in adult court? When would you use your authority to file charges in adult court, and when would you pursue a case in juvenile court? We'll start with you, Ms. Howard.
Okay. So being the juvenile prosecutor in my 3-county circuit, this is something that I have a lot of experience with. There are certain crimes that are initiated, or the exclusive jurisdiction rest in superior court. And so for those set of crimes, a lot of times they would obviously have to start in superior court. But if we felt that the child was amenable to treatment by having different evaluations done, different studies with the family, then those cases it would be transferred to juvenile court. And that was a decision that I made. And so anytime a child can be rehabilitated in the community, they are amenable to treatment. And of course, you have to look at the severity of the offense, and also restorative justice, as we talked about before, making sure the victims are a part of that process. But it's something that I have done in my career on numerous occasions.
Mr. Cook.
You know, as the only candidate with significant major felony trial experience, I've had to deal with this quite a bit. And these are some of the most heartbreaking cases you can ever have. It's part of the reason why we've worked so hard to institute juvenile justice reform, because many of these kids, by the time they get to superior court, have done something so awful that it's hard to look the other way. They've killed someone, they've shot and robbed someone, they've raped someone, and these are some of the most heartbreaking cases you'll ever come across. That is why we began our juvenile justice reform efforts, so that we could build them up as kids and make them strong, make strong kids, so we wouldn't have to fix them as broken adults. I do believe if there's a way you can remedy the situation in juvenile court, it should be done that way. But unfortunately, the instances where we can try them in adult court, it's usually so far gone, it's a horrible decision no matter what decision you end up making.
Thank you. The next question. State and local agencies will be working with limited resources due to budget cuts caused by COVID-19. What would be your top 2 to 3 priorities? How would you devote your resources in the DA's office? We'll start with you, Mr. Cook.
As the only candidate who's had significant trial experience, I've tried over 150 jury trials. I know what it's like when you walk in and you have to work with a backlog. And so what we'll need to do is make sure that we have cases ready immediately, that they are all ready for trial, and that we hold the most violent offenders accountable with jury trials as soon as they open. At this point, we have such a significant backlog. I know that these lawyers are going to need the advice of an experienced prosecutor. I'm the only candidate who's tried a murder as first chair. I've tried 16 in 1 year and several dozen over my career. And they need someone who has the experience to guide them in cases like this, and who can say, look, I've been where you are. I know what it's like to try 12 cases in a year, not just 12 in a career, and be able to give them the best advice possible to get justice for our community.
Ms. Howard?
Yes. My experience it is very different from my opponent. My experience is vast. I've experienced in superior, probate, accountability, juvenile, as well as the appellate courts of Georgia. I've actually argued before the Supreme Court of Georgia. So as district attorney, if someone has a question in that office, I will be able to give them some guidance, because I've been a career prosecutor and I have done it all. I have been first chair on a murder case that we did get a guilty verdict on. And as far as resources, I will focus as a district attorney on public safety. And as far as where my opponent puts his resources, if you look at the budget for Macon-Bibb, you go back to 2014, contractual labor, $14,500. That amount is over $500,000 for private attorneys to do work out of Atlanta in Bibb, Crawford, and Peach counties. I will definitely not put my time and attention on Atlanta lawyers.
Our next question. What, if any, remedies do you propose for dealing with mass incarceration and longer sentences for people of color. We'll go with you, Ms. Howard, first.
Thank you. As I said, case flow analysis is so important. You can do all of the training, the implicit bias training, we're fair. What does that mean? Nobody knows what that means. We know how to look at raw data. And my opponent has had 7.5 years to give us some data of what fairness looks like in Bibb, Crawford, and Peach counties. So that will be one of the first things that I do, a case flow analysis. Like I said before, we can improve what we simply refuse to measure. These are things that we can measure, and it is not being done. So we need to figure out where we are, and then we need to work with the community and have progressive criminal justice reform initiatives so that we can make our community safer and we can have more equitable outcomes.
Thank you. Mr. Cook?
There's really no guesswork involved in this. The experts in this field say that the number one way to do this is to intervene, and the best way to intervene is through a school justice partnership. That's why we have two. That's why we're working on building the third one. And the reason they say this is because kids spend most of their time at school, and if they're going to exhibit the effects of that trauma, then we're going to see it at school, which is why we screen them for services there. And let me tell you something. When these kids get services, it's not just for them. Oftentimes when the parents come in, they say, listen, I know you saw this with my son, John, but his brother's got the same exact problems. Can he get services too? And we end up providing services to the entire family. That is the point of a school justice partnership, is so that we build strong kids so we don't have to fix them as broken adults, and we don't have to depend upon the criminal justice system to do that. That is what success looks like, and that's why we've done it.
Thank you both for your candid, informed answers. We will now move to closing statements, and we'll begin with you, Ms. Howard.
Thank you so much. As the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, the number one priority of the District Attorney should be public safety. Public safety is not profiling Black and brown small business owners, sending them into bankruptcy, and violating their civil rights. Public safety is not creating only one program in 8 years for our youth. Public safety is not holding record restriction clinics only during an election season so that you can check off the criminal justice reform box when you could have been doing so since 2013. We don't have another 4 years to waste on disengaged leadership and misplaced priorities. We're at 25 homicides. My opponent says in his latest ad that he's given us his best. Well, we gave him a chance and we aren't safer. I am the best choice, and I ask for your vote as the first woman and first African-American district attorney in Middle Georgia on June 9th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cook.
All I've ever wanted was to be the best possible DA for my family and for every Middle Georgia family. And by all metrics, I've done just that. I'm incredibly proud of my personal record of fighting to protect Georgia women and girls before this job and during this job. There's a reason so many female DAs in Georgia, like DeKalb Sherry Boston, have endorsed me. There's a reason the Macon Bar Association named me Lawyer of the Year for my work securing justice for Middle Georgia women and girls. These alternative sentencing programs, crime prevention programs, partnerships with our faith community, and neighborhood leaders don't just happen. It takes someone believing in collaborative community approach. We made an effort to hire more women. I believe your timer's off by 30 seconds in the DA's office, and we did just that. We made an effort to hire more veterans in the DA's office, and we did just that. We created a program for record restriction and expungement, and we've done that. My signature school justice partnerships directly increases graduation rates and decreases crime, putting kids on a positive path and breaking the school to prison pipeline. As our DA, there is literally nothing more important to me than keeping our kids in school and out of jail and protecting our Middle Georgia families. That single focus is why this community put their faith in me 8 years ago. And I think it's why they'll put their faith in me again. Thank you, and God bless you.
Excuse me, my time was cut short by 30 seconds. I did adjust my closing, but I would like to take advantage of the additional 30 seconds since my opponent got that opportunity.
I'll yield to the timekeeper. Did we have an issue with the time? Yes.
My apologies.
Okay. Ms. Howard, would you proceed?
Yes. So as the chief law enforcement officer, the number one priority of the district attorney should be public safety. We stand at 25 homicides in Bibb County. As your district attorney, I will always make decisions that address the values of this community. I know what those values are, and I share those with you. My campaign has made over 30,000 phone calls, and people want change. They want to be safe. My opponent has given us his best, and my best is better. So I ask for your vote on June 9th. Thank you.
Thank you both so very much for taking the time to come and talk to potential voters. We will now ask you to step down, and we will bring on our sheriff's candidates. Thank you so much.
Hey, this is Rachel Gamble. I'm setting everything up. I'm getting David Davis and JT Ricketson into the meeting right now, and I'm just going to hide the video for our district attorney candidates. It'll take just 1 second here. Thank you all for your patience. All right, I've asked Mr. Ricketson to start his video. There should be a pop-up box. There we go. Thank you, guys.
Are we good?
We are good. We're good to go.
All right.
Audio. Good, good.
All right. We will now begin questions for our second segment involving the sheriff candidates, and we'll have opening statement from David Davidson.
All right, good evening. And thanks to Links, Georgia Women, and the League of Women Voters for having this forum to allow our candidates an opportunity to speak to the voters. I am David Davis, and I am seeking a third term as your sheriff. I am a lifelong resident of Macon and attended local public schools. I'm a graduate of Macon State College and of the FBI National Academy. And I'm also a certified law enforcement instructor. I've received advanced training in community policing, media relations, criminal investigations, hostage negotiations, and executive management of law enforcement and jail operations. I have a solid record of accomplishments since becoming sheriff. Consolidation resulted in the merging of the Macon Police Department with the Bibb County Sheriff's Office, creating one of the largest law enforcement agencies in Georgia. We have implemented programs which have reduced crime and have united the Sheriff's Office with our citizens. And I have been a leader in the effort to get deputies and all of Macon-Bibb employees better pay. And I have been recognized by civic, religious, and professional organizations for law enforcement and community leadership. And I've been endorsed by the Police Benevolent Association in my campaign for re-election as sheriff. I have a passion for service to this community, and I have experience and knowledge needed to help us meet the challenges before us. So please vote for me, David Davis, in the upcoming Democratic primary on June the 9th and in the general election in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and my apologies for mispronouncing your last name. You know I know better. Mr. Ricketson, please.
Hey, my name is JT Ricketson, and I'm running for Bibb County Sheriff. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself and why I decided to run for sheriff. My wife, Tammy, and I moved to Middle Georgia in Macon about 30 years, a little over 30 years ago. Since then, we've raised our two sons. They've graduated high school, gone off to college, graduated college, and moved away. My work experience, basically about a month and a half or so ago, I retired from GBI after serving for 36 years. My education is a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice, a master's in public administration. Both of those degrees are from Milledgeville College. I have a second master's degree in public safety administration. That's from Columbus State University. I graduated from the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. I currently serve on the executive board for the FBI National Academy for the state of Georgia. I have been teaching criminal justice classes at Middle Georgia State University for the past 14 years. As far as my community involvement, I've coached baseball, have raising two sons here, basketball, soccer. My boys did scouts. I've also taught Sunday school, and my wife and I had helped feed the homeless for about 3.5 years. Again, we have some serious problems here, and we need some new solutions. Violent crime, property crimes, the deputy shortage. I could go on and on about all the problems, and they are just getting worse. And so, again, I've got some ideas and some initiatives. Thank you.
I'm sorry, thank you. We will now begin questions from the organization sponsoring the forum. The first question is about budgets. They're likely to be very tight and probably shrinking over the next few years. What proposals do you have for officer recruitment and retention, and what other models for law enforcement would you put in place that don't rely on more boots on the ground? And we'll start with you, Mr. Ricketson.
Okay, again, could you repeat part of your first of your question? You were muted, so I didn't hear it.
Okay, here goes. Budgets are likely to be very tight and probably shrinking for the next several years. What proposals do you have for officer recruitment and retention? And what other models for law enforcement would you put in place that don't rely on boots on the ground?
Okay, again, working with budgets I've been doing this for since I've been a supervisor with GBI, working around the state. There are a number of things that I would like to start here. One of them is hiring some retired deputies and former Macon PD officers. I think that's something that we could do. We could offer them training for their 20 hours of in-service. We could provide the ammo for their firearms qualification, but we could bring those in a contract basis, or we can free up our deputies, our full-time deputies, to get back to doing the hard work. So again, I could hire retired folks to put them in non-essential roles to do that. A second thing that I really wanted to start here, and I actually tried to do this about 10 years ago, was to start a multi-jurisdictional drug task force. That is a force multiplier. That's where we reach out to all our surrounding counties, and we start looking at street crime, drug crimes, we look at gang activity, and again, that is a force multiplier. But what also is you get fringe benefits from that. As we start to make these arrests, we are going to get asset forfeiture. I can take that money, I can't replace salaries with it, but I can certainly pay for training, I could pay for equipment, I could buy cars. There's a number of things that I could do to supplement my budget that has nothing to do with the established budget.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
There we go. Thank you, Sherry. You know, budgets and this time of the year, especially with the COVID-19 crisis, has really put us in a flux as to what to expect over the next few years or the next few months even. So the sheriff's office has nearly a $50 million budget. And since I've been chief deputy over the last, since I was chief deputy with the sheriff's office before consolidation and now the sheriff, I've intimately involved in budgets and learning how to cut budgets and putting the right programs in. One of the things that we're looking to do is to use technology. One of the things that we have had that has really helped us is this NIBIN system. It's a National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, which helps us to take shell casings from one crime scene and link them to other crime scenes and link guns. And that cuts down a lot of man hours. It cuts down a lot of shoe work to track down these criminals when you have linking shell casings from one case to another. Another initiative that we have started that will be installed here during the summer cameras around in various parts of our community in cooperation with Georgia Power and Cox Communications, a program called Sight View, which will give us some eyes in various parts of our community so that we can see who may be doing some bad things and get the video and get identifications made. So all of these things run together to help us to be a force multiplier and to do the best we can with what we got. And also recruiting. Last year we instituted a program where we pay deputies up to $2,500 for coming in. So the main thing, as budgets go, we need to raise that starting salary for our deputies so that we can attract some good quality candidates.
Our next question. There is a public perception that law enforcement officers too often deal with volatile situations with a shoot-first approach. What training is offered or should be offered to help overcome racial biases, stereotypes, and lack of cultural understanding to more effectively deal with issues of equity in law enforcement? And that question will be answered first by Mr. Davis.
All right. You got it? You ready? Thanks, Sherry. And that's one of the things that I'm the proudest of our sheriff's office and the people who work there. I think one of the things that helps us overcome some of the things that you've seen in other parts of the country have been that our sheriff's office reflects the community. The makeup of the sheriff's office is demographically just about the exact same as what the makeup is of Macon and Bibb County. And many of our people that work at the sheriff's office grew up in this community, so they know these streets, they know these individuals, so that when we have a crime, these individuals, our investigators' phones start ringing because they know these individuals, maybe even grew up with some of them, so that we're able to solve that crime. But we have that community attitude. Our programs, our CHAMPS programs in the schools, our Explorer programs for teenagers, which help us to cultivate the idea of becoming law enforcement officers in high school students, of which one of the kids through the Explorer program is now a deputy. So those types of things, our safety walks in the neighborhoods, help bond us with our community, and which help us to show that we're not always out there writing tickets. We're not always out there to arrest everybody, but we're out there to give a leg up, to give a handout, and to give an assistance to the people in our neighborhoods. And that has really paid off for us. There's always a law enforcement nexus to everything we do. So that partnership, that community involvement and community dedication to our officers really pays off when we're looking for somebody. It pays off when we are out trying to do enforcement action. So we have to build that trust and that partnership with our community, and I think we've done that very well.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Ricketson, please.
I became a post-certified instructor in 1989. I spent about 5 years with GBI working as a training coordinator, and a couple of years I was the actual academy director. One of the things that we did was what's called a judgmental simulator, where we put the agents through different simulations where they would have to use judgment. And as a strong proponent of training, I think that is the best way to get your deputies, your officers in your agency to understand different situations. Again, we can't come up with all the situations, but we can certainly come up with several for them to work their way through. We can see how they are using their thought processes, and we take that information, and if they're having problems with it, then we do further training for that. Some other things that I do also just for teaching classes is, again, we have, let's see, hang on one second. Yeah, so that's really pretty much it. It's through training. Again, when we do things through working with the community, is we will have partnerships. There are some community policing activities that I plan to implement that will engage the community, involve the community. I know that there's a lot of times when you see the deputies, they're just riding in their cars. They're not actually out of their car. that's some other things that I want to get involved in and get them back out on the streets with the community.
Thank you. The next question has to deal with immigration. Under 287G, Immigration Customs Enforcement, or ICE, forms an agreement with a state or local agency, most often a county sheriff. And this agreement delegates specific immigration enforcement authority to officers within the local agency. This results in local governments doing federal work at local expense. Complaints about this system are that it leads to racial profiling, civil rights violations, isolation of immigrant communities, and family separations. In the past, the Macon-Bibb Sheriff's Office has not had a 287G agreement. Do you believe that this is the correct policy going forward? Mr. Ricketson.
Again, as a law enforcement officer, we are there to enforce the laws. If there is something that's with the law that needs to be changed, then through the Sheriff's Association, we can get with our General Assembly, the guys that make the laws. We can talk about that sort of stuff. But again, my position as a law enforcement officer, if somebody has committed a crime, they're going to be arrested, and we're going to hold them. If there is a hold for them, again, we'll have to comply with the federal law.
Mr. Davis.
Sherry, see, we got it. There we go. Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, several years ago, we were approached by Immigrations and Customs, ICE, about involving ourselves with the 287G program. The restrictions and the expectations were just so cumbersome for us, and philosophically, I don't really agree with that. Now, certainly, if we have a person who has a detainer from Immigrations and ICE, we will hold them. We have to hold them for a certain period of time, and we will certainly do that. But the other requirements for the 287G program were just very cumbersome, and we would have people brought in from all throughout Georgia into our jail, basically as warehousing them in the Bibb County Jail, waiting for them to be deported to other places. So philosophically and practically, and as far as capacity, it just didn't work for us. But we do work with Immigrations and Customs on individuals who are dangerous, on individuals who have detainers and who need to be held in our jail. And we hold them for them, and when the time is up, we tell them to come get them, and they've worked very well with us. But to really contractually obligate ourselves with the 287G program is something that we've really been exposed to, but we would not consider, given the certain the current restrictions and current obligations that are placed on the local jail through that program. So under my office, we wouldn't be a part of that.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. The final question from our sponsor organizations has to do with mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and there are 1.2 million individuals living with mental illness sitting in the nation's jails and prisons. A 2015 study by the Sentencing Project illustrated that states with less access to mental health care have more adults who are in the criminal justice system. Georgia is among those states with the least access to mental health care, and one of the highest rates of incarceration. How does this affect the Sheriff's Department, and what can be done to address this issue in Macon-Bibb? We'll start with you, Mr. Davis.
All right. You got it? All right, there we go. Thanks. The mental health situations in jail, you're correct, Sherry. The best mental health treatment facilities in all of Georgia are in the county jails. About a quarter of the inmates in our jail have some type of mental health or abuse, substance abuse issue. And we have some of the finest mental health practitioners in our jail to help those individuals. We'll have people who come in who are just in really just out of control, who have terrible situations, and within just a couple of days, they are normal, just back acting regularly like anybody else. And so that's been an issue that Georgia sheriffs have been at the forefront of for a number of years. Fortunately, here in Macon-Bibb, we have River's Edge, behavioral service that sort of partners with us to help people on the outside. But it all boils down to money. And as you remember, the state of Georgia is under a sort of a consent agreement with the Department of Justice about their mental health programs throughout the whole state. And so that has had an effect on the local jails as well as local communities. There has been some progress made, but there's still a lot of progress to be made. I think community-based help organizations, community-based help to where that people who are out of jail, who need their medication, people coming and checking on them, people knocking on the door, asking, have you taken your medicine? Do you need anything? We still need more of that, because we see it all too often that an individual gets out of very good care in the jail, and within a couple of weeks, because of not that aftercare and coordination, they're right back with us. And it's a sad situation, and it's really something that county jails don't need to be fooling with.
Thank you. Mr. Ricketson.
Well, unfortunately, the system that we have today, again, from a law enforcement perspective, we have to enforce the laws. Unfortunately, there are a lot of mental health folks that do cross over the line and violate the law. My wife and I worked for 3.5 years with the homeless community here in Macon, and we saw firsthand a lot of folks that were struggling with either drug addiction or mental health issues, and sometimes they commit offenses. Again, there is a pretrial diversion. We have a mental health court here in Bibb County that we can work with those folks. Again, the criteria that we have to look at is the severity of the crime. Again, through 36 years with working with GBI, again, working a number of cases all over the state of Georgia, we've come across folks that have gotten off their medications and committed either minor offenses or very serious offenses. So again, when we look at the criteria, if they're minor, then certainly we can go to the district attorney's office. We can work directly with them through the pretrial diversion, look through the mental health court. Again, having partnerships with the River's Edge and other mental health providers here, where we can get some evaluations as we bring people in. But unfortunately, that is what we have today, where a lot of people that commit crimes have mental issues, and they're left at the county jail for them to try to take care of. So again, those are issues that we have to deal with.
Thank you. We'll now move to questions from the audience. Mr. Ricketson, you'll go first with this question. How do you think our community residents perceive overall public safety? What changes do you envision for the department to help residents feel safe no matter where they are in the county?
Okay, from what I can tell, talking to the community members here, again, Tammy and I have lived here over 30 years. Just since our consolidation, our crime just seems to be getting off the charts. We have had our 2018 year was one of our worst, most dangerous years. I think we had 42 murders. We were considered in the top 10 in the nation as far as most dangerous places to live. And again, if you're a business owner or someone trying to attract other businesses here, those aren't the statistics that you want to have. So what again, just looking at that, looking at the programs, looking at the deputy shortage, there are just, again, a number of problems that we have out there. I haven't seen much in the way of some new solutions, and I believe I have those solutions to try to correct that.
Mr. Davis.
Yep. Thank you, Sherry. I think one of the issues that we have in our community is the perception of crime. Our figures show that crime, that last year was the lowest year of reported crimes in Macon-Bibb since consolidation. And our property crimes continue trending downward, while some of our violent crimes are up, and we can talk about that. But I think there is a perception. I think that when something happens, it gets repeated over and over and over in the community, and we try to work to change that perception. Not saying that they're not issues, they're not burglaries, entering autos, and that sort of thing happening in certain parts of the community, and there's not violent crime happening in other parts of the community. But we do a great job of making cases, of finding those people who are involved in doing the crimes. We have an 80% solve rate for our homicides. We have a very high, over 70% solve rate for our aggravated assaults. We have a high solve rate for burglaries and thefts. And we find that many of these burglaries and thefts are by younger people.
Thank you. This question will go first to Mr. Davis. Do you believe community policing is effective? And if you do, what are some specific concrete steps that must be taken to implement it? Mr. Davis.
Yes, all right, there you go, there we go. Yeah, community policing is essential. We have to have that partnership with our community, and we have over 30 programs at the Sheriff's Office that really speak to that very thing. We have certainly Neighborhood Watch. We have the CHAMPS program in the schools. We have our Consider the Consequences program. We have our Explorer programs. We have our Police Athletic League programs. We have all of these kinds of things that bond us and unite us with our community, but most especially these programs unite us with those who may be most at risk. Our Outreach and Restorative Justice Center that we will have coming online later this year will really give us a one-stop shop to really go out and meet with the community and partner with even more community organizations to make a difference in these most at-risk youth, and really throughout all of our communities, no matter where people may live. And that is one of the hallmarks of my administration, is community involvement.
Thank you. Mr. Ricketson?
Yeah, community policing is very effective. What I say is we've got to get the deputies out of their patrol cars and back out on the streets. The neighborhood watch programs and going to having officers or deputies in schools for school resource officers, all those things are great programs and definitely need to be implemented. The bike patrol, again, when you look at downtown, we have a lot of events that occur downtown at night or on weekends and so forth. And when I go down there, you don't really, when you look around, you don't really see that many deputies. And I believe we should have a lot more of them on foot patrols. But another initiative that I would like to start is looking into grant opportunities for mounted patrol. I think those things, when you look at the research on those, an officer or a deputy on a horseback can replace 6 to 8 officers in a regular patrol duty. So again, those are different things, but I am a firm believer in talking to the community. I am a public servant. Thank you.
Thank you. In the wake of the Arbery case, what kinds of conversations have you had or would you have with members of neighborhood watches to make sure we don't have such a case here? Mr. Ricketson.
Again, I'm coming from a state agency that actually is working that case there, but we work a lot of officer-involved shootings. What has come out of this case down in Glenn County is citizens that are basically trying to take law enforcement into their own hands, and it's a vigilante system, and that is something that we can't have. Again, I think talking with communities, holding classes for folks in neighborhoods, neighborhood watch, women's associations, about how to protect yourself and things like that. See something, say something. If you saw something, this guy, if he was out there doing something, or you see someone in your neighborhood, try to write down their tag, try to get a description, get the best witness that you can, but do not get out there and try to take the law into your own hands. That is for trained officers and deputies.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
Yeah. We got it? We ready to go? Thanks. All right, thanks, Sherry. That a conversation that we have had and we will continue to have with our citizens in neighborhood watch meetings and in town halls, to where that we don't need that vigilante type type activity going on here. We've had these hard. Oh, there we go. We've had these hard conversations with individuals in our community. The best thing that I would like for citizens to do is to be good witnesses. If you see something that doesn't look right, or you see something, even though a person may have committed a crime right in front of you, be a good witness. Be a good witness, because law enforcement, we have the training. We know how to approach someone. And you have to remember, someone who is a civilian, who is not in law enforcement gear, they are unknown to anybody, just as you saw in the Arbery case, that he didn't know who those individuals were. And so that is the best thing that the civilians can do, is be a good witness for law enforcement.
All right, this next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Davis. What do you consider to be the most important skill a Macon-Bibb sheriff deputy should have? Do you think the current officer training program is sufficient? What types of training programs will you implement or improve upon?
I think it's essential for any officer, especially in these changing times, is to have good reasoning skills. You have to have reasoning skills because every situation is different. You have to figure out things on the fly. You have to have a good background, certainly training in community policing, training in crisis intervention, training in dealing with the public, certainly training in mentally ill. One of the things that I have implemented is everybody at the sheriff's office must take crisis intervention training. Crisis intervention training sort of covers the gamut of certainly people who may have mental health issues, but other type of situations in crisis, and teaches our deputies and teaches law enforcement how to deal with people in those type situations. And we've made that training mandatory for all of our people. And so it helps give them those skills needed that hopefully they can diffuse a situation before it gets to a point of where any type of deadly force has to be used.
Thank you. Mr. Ricketson.
Yes, ma'am. The officer's judgment or deputy's judgment is critical. When an incident occurs and a deputy responds out to the scene, they have the discretion based on their training and their field training and so forth, their academic training, to make a decision. Was a law violated? If so, then again, that's in their discretion to go forward with the case or not forward with the case. So their judgment skill is very critical. I've been through the crisis intervention training. My agency actually promoted that. We sent out agents to do that full time to train the rest of the officers and deputies around the state. Again, trying to learn how to deal with someone that's dealing with mental issues or drug dependence. Those skills are just invaluable when you get out there. But again, a deputy's judgment, using their discretion when they get on scene, whether to put handcuffs on somebody or to calm the situation down, mitigate it, and then move away.
All right, thank you. What is your perspective, Mr. Ricketson, on video gambling and slot machines? What are your priorities on prosecuting illegal gambling?
Okay, currently in the state of Georgia, we have laws against commercial gambling. A lot of people will look at that and say, oh, that's a victimless crime. But what I can tell you is I've seen on the other side of that. I've seen the mamas with the children and the daddy's gone out there and spent all their money. They don't have any money for their food. On the same flip side, I've seen women go there. They sit at these machines. They had the flashing lights. Again, you can go by a convenience store, see 3 or 4 cars out in front. And when you walk in the store, there's nobody in there. And so you're thinking, well, where are they? Well, they're all in the back where these machines are. And so again, it is not a victimless crime. These crimes do affect folks. There are victims out there. And we've got to stop this. Again, it's a multi-million-dollar business. that we need to look into. And again, a multi-jurisdictional task force can work on that kind of stuff here in our backyard.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
Yes, the gambling situation. You have the gaming machines, and what's happened in Georgia. It has evolved to where, you know, the Georgia Lottery is part of all of the machines that you see in convenience stores, and all that is all part of the Georgia Lottery. And so they take in their part of the proceeds from the machines, but it takes a human toll, whether they're illegal or illegal or what. It's an addiction. It's well known that gambling becomes an addiction just as much as drugs or alcohol or anything like that. And these typically prey upon the people who can least afford to gamble. You see these machines in some of the poorest neighborhoods where people figure, I'm going to play the machine, I might hit the numbers and get the big score tonight. And so it's a tax on the poor, it's a tax on the underprivileged, and it's sometimes hard to make those cases. And the only way you can make the case is if they're paying out in cash and that sort of thing.
Thank you. I'd like to squeeze in this one timely question. What are your priorities and challenges in overseeing the department during a global pandemic? We'll start with you, Mr. Davis.
Well, it is a challenge. It is a challenge because I have the challenge of dealing with nearly 800 inmates in a jail. Fortunately, we've had less than a dozen that have had the COVID-19 illness. We also deal with our workers, our deputies. We've had a few of those who have tested positive. So we have that, and then we have to deal with serving the public. We give our officers the personal protective equipment, the support that they need, so they can go out and do their jobs. And I'm very proud of our deputies. It's at crisis times like this whenever our deputies come to the forefront. They're out there on the front lines, doing their job, coming to work as they should, and serving the public. So I'm very proud of them. But it is a challenge because we're in unprecedented times. We're in uncharted waters here. We're having to talk to other agencies as to how they have coped with this and make sure that we put in policies and procedures that need to be done. So we keep plugging at it.
Thank you. Mr. Ricketson.
The safety of the deputies out there and the investigators trying to work their criminal cases are really one of your top priorities to try to make sure, because they are probably the ones that are out there with the most exposure risk. The safety of the staff in the jail, same thing with the inmates. We got to look at that. But again, providing your folks with training, again, cross-contamination training. There's a lot of things that you can do through just regular training, through criminal training, like crime scene work, where we try not to cross-contaminate. You can do the same thing. You can have personal protective equipment available that you keep in the trunks of all the patrol cars. Again, this is a dangerous job. These folks know the risk when we go to work for law enforcement. Again, I've been doing this for 36 years. There are a lot of risks that we have to assume in this, but we can mitigate those risks by proper training, proper equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Ricketson. That concludes the regular part of our session. We'll now have closing statements. Again, 90 seconds. Mr. Ricketson, you can go first.
Okay, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. Folks, we have several serious problems here in Bibb County that are not improving. I am not an alarmist. I am a realist, however. I call it like I see it. The violent crimes, property crimes, and the deputy shortage, I believe, are all connected. They're all getting worse, and really there's no end in sight. Public safety is important to everyone. Democrats, Republicans, independents, we all want to be safe. We all deserve to be safe. And the sheriff plays a great role in providing that safety. I've been a public servant for over 36 years with GBI. GBI is a state law enforcement agency with a great reputation of getting things done. I've been trained to run towards problems and look for solutions. That is in my DNA. I am a public servant at heart. I've been a part of this community for over 30 years and I want to help. I could just retire and enjoy my retirement, but I want to make a difference here. I have several new solutions. I have programs. I have initiatives that I will put to work immediately. The primary is on June 9th, where you have to declare a party. But the real election that we need to be focusing on is on November 3rd. At that election, you can vote for any candidate. If you're concerned for your safety and you want to see a change in leadership, please vote for JT Ricketson. Thank you and God bless.
It appears Ms. Marshall's screen is frozen. Ms. Marshall, if you can hear me, you may want to exit out and get back in the meeting. Ms. Cox, would you like to take over right here? I know it's Mr. Davis's turn, but I didn't want to step in.
Yes, Mr. Sheriff Davis, if you will give your closing statement, please.
Okay, all right. Thanks, and thanks again to the Links, Georgia Women, and the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum tonight. This year, you have a choice to make for your sheriff. In me, you have someone who has worked at the Bibb County Sheriff's Office for over 40 years to make a difference in our community. In my time as your sheriff, we have walked and worked together to make a positive impact on Macon-Bibb. From Riverly to Rutland, from Dry Branch to Lizella, we have changed lives. We have initiated innovative outreach programs which have helped unite the Sheriff's Office with our citizens, and our Outreach and Restorative Justice Center will accomplish even more for our citizens, particularly those who are most at risk.
Sheriff Davis, I hate to interrupt you, but you were not unmuted at the beginning of yours. Can you please begin again?
Wait a minute, I gotta make it up again. All right, okay, we ready? We got it. Sorry, here we go.
No,
all right, we got it.
Was he? Let me see. You're good to go, Mr. Davis. It's been unmuted.
Okay, we ready? Okay, good. Sorry, thanks again to Georgia Links, Georgia Women, the Links, and the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum here tonight. This year, you have a choice to make for your sheriff. In me, you have someone who has worked at the Bibb County Sheriff's Office for over 40 years to make a difference in our community. In my time as your sheriff, we have walked and worked together to make a positive impact on Macon-Bibb. From Riverly to Rutland, from Dry Branch to Lizella, we have changed lives. We have initiated innovative outreach programs which have helped unite the Sheriff's Office with our citizens. Our Outreach and Restorative Justice Center will accomplish even more for our citizens, particularly those who need guidance to keep them on the right path from going down a road to the jail. We have implemented groundbreaking law enforcement programs which have removed hundreds of dangerous offenders from our streets and have linked guns to violent criminals. The video image that we will get from cameras being installed around our community will help us identify evildoers in our neighborhoods. Remember, there are always more good people than bad people in our community, and I want to work with the good people to make great changes and do great things to meet the many challenges that we have before us in our community. So to me, the choice is clear, and I hope you will agree and will vote for me, David Davis, in the upcoming Democratic primary, and then when it really counts in November in the general election. And thank you.
Mary Lou, if you can unmute your mic, I just sent you a request to unmute.
Did that do it?
There you go. And I'm working on getting our DA candidates back on here as well.
Okay, well, I'll wait till they get on. All right. I think that's everybody, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Mary Lou Ezel, President of the League of Women Voters, and I want to thank each of you for participating in our forum. And I want to thank all those who tuned in and have watched the forum tonight and who have sent questions. If you have any friends or relatives who have not seen this live performance, please let them know that they can see the entire thing recorded on YouTube on any of the sites of the sponsors. And the sponsors, of course, are Georgia Women, Macon chapter of the Links Incorporated, and the League of Women Voters. Now we have a few people that we need to thank for making this a success tonight. More than a few, actually. I want to start off our moderator, Sherry Marshall, our Zoom manager, Rachel Gamble, our media coverage, Susan Long, our timekeeper, Carolyn Hargrove, and of course, our 4 candidates. Our 2 candidates for DA, David Cook and Anita Howard, and our 2 candidates for sheriff, David Davis and JT Ricketson. I appreciate, and we all do, that you joined the forum and that you were willing to participate. Our community benefits from this type of participation. Also, I want to just say that a couple of things I want to remind you of. If you have not filled out your census, please do so. You may know federal dollars are at stake for our county and state, so get those forms in if you have not. And most importantly, vote. Vote early, vote absentee, or vote in person on June the 9th at your precinct. This is your right, and it is your privilege as a citizen. Vote. Thank you all again for being with us. It's been a really informative evening for everybody, and good night.
Thanks,
Good
Mary.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey guys, we're no longer live streaming on Facebook. I just